All right, here we go. We're live. Welcome in, everybody. This is The Slate. We are a DraftKings show. We take you up until just about 6 o'clock. It is a Tuesday, April 25th, 2023. Brendan Glasheen joined by Matt LaMarca. We will join you now for the next 35 minutes-ish. We're going to spend some time on the NBA before the show wraps. I think that's pretty important, too, because I want to get LaMarca's thoughts on the De'Aaron Fox injury and what it means, how the line has moved, if there's interest in Sacramento with the series going back to their building, series tied 2-2. We'll mix in some NBA at the end, but the headline, I think, for our purposes here on the Slate, we try to get news, but the rumor mongling really takes place for
Mongling? Isn't it mongering?
Mongling. Maybe I just made up a new way of saying it. Mongering. Whatever.
I knew what you meant. I'm sorry. That's a
Words.
big pet. It's one of the things that my dad hates about me, just to completely take the shows off the rails before we even get started. I am somebody that if I hear something wrong, I have to correct it. I
That's
can't
fair.
let it slide. I'm a real, I don't know, for lack of a better word, I can be a real jerk about that stuff. So I'm sorry, Glash. I knew what
No,
you meant.
you're not a jerk.
I didn't need to do it, and I did it anyway.
No, just to make you a jerk. It's just now I've learned a lesson and I can be better going forward, and that makes us better. So I think it's actually very productive.
All right. Thank you.
Rumor mongering around the NFL draft. And all it takes is someone to go on Reddit and hypothesize that Will Levis is telling folks in his circle that the Carolina Panthers are going to take him and Bryce Young's going to slip to 2. Everyone overreacts. The market changes. Now, all of a sudden at DraftKings, he is plus 450 to go number 1 overall. That's a headline story. Aaron Rodgers trade that broke yesterday afternoon. Jeff and I talked about it yesterday. Packers are now picking at 13, Jets at 15. So when Adam Schefter gave the news on NFL Live, I really didn't get the whole crew, and now it's turned into his meme and this social media image that everyone's using. It was only because Schefter had yet to clarify that it was a pick swap and not that the Packers had acquired a first-round pick for Aaron Rodgers, which they still will probably next year. Anywho, that's a big story. I haven't heard your thoughts yet on the draft. What to you jumps out to you as we approach the draft 2 days away?
I think that the Will Levis stuff is like super interesting. I don't necessarily buy that he's going to be the number 1 pick. I still think that that's Bryce Young. His odds have come down ever so slightly, but not to the point where I think he's necessarily a value to bet him at this point. The bigger thing is just that, like, it is clear that these NFL teams like Levis more than the general public seems to, right? I think that, the random guy sitting on his couch breaking down these prospects looks at Will Levis and says, this is not the type of guy that you want to invest a quarterback pick in, a premium pick. But NFL teams seem to like what he brings to the table. And could he be a bust? Sure. But I've gotten to the point where I know personally, I don't know enough about these quarterbacks to make that decision, but I just think if there's one position we're not great at evaluating at this point, it is quarterback. I mean, has there been a more universally hated quarterback prospect over the last decade than Josh Allen? Everybody hated that guy. I mean, he couldn't complete 55% of his passes while he was playing for Wyoming.
So you're saying leading into the draft?
Correct.
Okay. Josh Allen, class of 2018, 17?
I believe that's correct.
Okay. Keep going.
But yeah, if you believe any analyst out there on Twitter, he didn't have the accuracy to play quarterback in the NFL. And while he landed in a situation that was able to get the best out of him, I'm not saying that Josh Allen was this slam dunk, can't miss prospect that everybody just whiffed on. I think that situation and stuff like character that's much harder to measure, all that stuff matters a whole lot more than, arm talent and what these guys actually put on tape. So maybe this makes me, a sucker or whatever, but when an organization tells me that they think that Will Levis is a better prospect than CJ Stroud, I'm more than likely just inclined to believe them.
So are you saying that there's still value? Because now Will Levis has been connected to the 2nd pick by Houston.
Yep.
Or Houston could take a defensive player, Tyree Wilson, if somehow Jalen Carter shoots up the board. The other big name at 2 would be Will Anderson, who has been connected to Arizona. Or the Texans trade the pick and accumulate more assets. We've also heard Levis connected to the 4th overall pick. He's the favorite there at plus 130. He's close to being the favorite at two different spots, at 2 and at 4. Now it's Tyree Wilson at plus 150, just ahead of Levis, who's at plus 185 for 2. He's at plus 130 for 4.
So
if Levis goes 1, then the Texans have to decide, we want to bring in Bryce Young with our second pick.
If Levis goes 1, the Texans are running to the podium to hand in the Bryce Young card. Okay. They will be ecstatic with that outcome. That's the guy they've liked all along, if you believe what you hear. I think that they will take Levis if Bryce Young goes 1 as expected. Last week, I was talking about draft props with our good buddy Jeff Ulrich, and I mentioned that I really liked Levis to go number 2 at plus 300. That number has since come down.
I think,
to plus.
And Jeff mentioned that last night too. So go on. Yeah, he mentioned he's on that as well.
That number has now come down to plus 185. I still think that that's a good number there. I am still of the belief that Bryce Young is going to go first, and that the Texans have to take a quarterback at number 2. They can say all they want about, not about taking a defensive player. I just don't believe them.
Okay. I might believe them. I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Let me tell you why. Because if they really like Tyree Wilson or Will Anderson, they may not think there's a significant drop-off between Will Levis and, say, Trey Lance. If Lance is out there, and I know John Lynch spoke yesterday, but I think typically the more, it's like when Jaylen Brown hurt his hand, even as a Celtics guy, I'm like, Jaylen, the longer your story goes, the more questions I have. So when John Lynch has to go on and on and on about expecting to have Trey Lance at Niners camp and be playing an integral role on our football team, I have questions. I think they're shopping him. DeMeco Ryans, formerly of that San Francisco staff, that's an option. They could get Trey Lance for a cheaper price than the number 2 pick. He's a distressed asset. They could not have to spend number 2 overall pick capital. Instead, they could get Trey Lance. Or what if they're inclined, they draft close to the top of the second round? If they have any faith in Hendon Hooker, they could go that direction. There's also a possibility that the next option that would be sandwiched between those two. What if CJ Stroud falls to them at 12? I know it sounds insane. It sounds ridiculous. But no, I
think it's a realistic outcome. That was another thing that I posited when I was talking to Jeff last week. I think that there are more red flags with Stroud than people realize, at least in the eyes of NFL front offices. So it's possible. They could also just decide, you know what? We don't care about next season. We love Caleb Williams, and we're going to try to get the top pick. I just think that is like, to have the foresight to do that a year in advance is tough, right? Because you might lose your job, right? We already saw that with the last Texans head coach. Mm-hmm. So I think that they're going to try to get a quarterback in the building with that number 2 pick, maybe with the second pick that they have in the first round. But it's just, unless you have like overwhelming job security, it's hard to just say, you know what, I'm rolling out Davis Mills for 16 games next year. And as for the Trey Lance thing, I think if we've learned anything from the past handful of years, it's that retread quarterbacks do not work. Now, you can make a case that Lance has never really had a chance to start, so maybe he could be an exception. But, whether it's the Panthers talking themselves into Sam Darnold,
right?
A number of teams that have talked
Carson Wentz,
Baker Mayfield, Carson Wentz, it just doesn't work. Once these quarterbacks fail, it is extremely hard to build them back up. You can literally count the success stories on one hand. Ryan Tannehill had a pretty good stretch with the Titans, and Geno Smith looks like he's going to work out for the Seahawks. But
that's not a retread. He was just a career backup, I think. Geno's a different exception.
Yes, I would agree with that too. But I'm just throwing it out there because people will say, he changed teams and he
True. He was he was in his 30s at that point. No,
Right.
he wasn't a kid anymore, right? On a rookie deal.
Yes, exactly. So I think that that is a situation that, maybe you can talk yourself into it, but if I'm the Texans and I don't leave day one of the draft with a quarterback, I feel like I made a mistake personally.
Yeah. The other argument too, and you'd hear this, you hear this in other sports too. Like if Greg Popovich moves on from a player, or if even we'll use an NFL comp. If Bill Belichick is willing to move on from a player, if Kyle Shanahan is ready to move on from Trey Lance, that might not be a good
quarterback
thing.
That he can't get to be successful. That's a pretty big red flag.
Right. Now the whole other, and we'll move on after this. I mean, the whole other discussion is at the time of the draft in 2021, I felt the rumor mongering then was
Mongling.
Oh, see, now you're confusing me. The mongering then was Shanahan wanted Mac Jones, John Lynch, and others from the scouting department wanted Trey Lance.
Yep.
So maybe this is Shanahan using his power because of what he got out of Brock Purdy last year. And who knows if Purdy's health. And it sounds like they like Purdy. And the report, and I brought this up with Jeff yesterday, the report last week from Pro Football Talks Mike Florio was that the Niners are reportedly shopping Lance, and that's why Lynch had to come out and respond how he did in practices or early, what do you call this, mini camp? Yeah, mini camp practices. So it was a long answer. Didn't feel great about it. Okay, back to the draft. So the Levis stuff, I agree, is interesting. This is like the movement on the board right now on the screen share here has been very interesting in the last 5 minutes. We started the show with Levis at plus 185. Then it jumped to plus 190. Now it's back down to plus 175. This is happening in real time, folks. So Levis at 2. If he doesn't go 2, now CJ Stroud's the favorite at 3. That's interesting because that relates back to Adam Schefter's reporting a few weeks ago that not just a few, but several teams were interested in trading with Arizona to get the number 3 pick in the draft. We haven't heard much since then. So I wonder if a draft day trade or a trade leading up to Thursday is still in the cards for the Cardinals.
Nice pun. Yeah, I think that ultimately this is going to come down to what Arizona is looking for in terms of trade compensation. I think that there will be teams that are willing to move up, but I don't know if any of them are going to be eager enough to do so where they are going to pay quote unquote fair value for the pick, right? There's that famous Jimmy Johnson trade chart, and I don't know if any team is willing to meet the value for the number 3 overall pick. But if you're the Cardinals, would you rather take an extra, 3rd round pick to move down a few spots? Is that enough for you to do it? I think that if they stay where they are, they're going to grab Tyree Wilson. So I've bet this prop, or I can't bet them in New York, but I've recommended this prop back when it was at 5-1. It's now 3-1. I still think that's a fair number. If the Cardinals stay put and they do not trade back, I fully expect him to be the pick. He is the type of defender that their new defensive coordinator typically looks for in an edge rusher, more so than a guy like Will Anderson. So the question is will someone meet the Cardinals asking price to move up to number 3? And I think that with the amount of negative stuff that has come out regarding CJ Stroud, it would not shock me if the Cardinals are stuck picking at number 3 and they kind of just have to take the guy who they have as their best player available. And it would not shock me if that guy is Wilson on defense.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other note, and it's notable, it actually ties back in with the Niners and the price they had to pay to move up to 3 a couple years ago. If indeed, say, Tennessee was to get in the discussion, I bring up Tennessee because Peter King of NBC Sports said yesterday that the Tennessee Titans are linked to CJ Stroud. Right now, where did the Titans draft? 11th. They could wait. Maybe they don't need to move to 3 to get Stroud. That's very possible. They could maybe move it's no guarantee based on what we've heard about Stroud that he's going to go between 3 and 8. And this was the former leader to go number 1. based on the odds. So Stroud's at plus 275 at 3, but we can't imagine that's Arizona. So that would connect.
What is his what's his over under at this point?
You know, something that's a great question. I looked for that yesterday and I could not find it. So I don't know. I don't even know if that market's available on DraftKings.
Yeah, it doesn't look like it's up at this point.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. It wasn't up yesterday. That interests me too.
I would be very inclined to bet the over when that number eventually comes out, assuming that it is something like 4.5, right? I think that there is a legitimate chance that he ends up being the fourth quarterback taken out of this group. I think that the Colts, at 4, they are certainly a team that could take a quarterback, but it would not shock me if Anthony Richardson ends up being that guy.
Richardson being at possibly 4 to the Colts, 5 to Seattle. Haven't heard much on the Raiders or Falcons front about quarterback. It feels like they're going elsewhere, possibly defense.
Yeah, the Falcons, I think, are really content to just play things out with Desmond Ridder. Which, I mean, they did. By the way,
the running back, Bijan Robinson out of Texas, is your favorite to go 8, which is where Atlanta selects, and he's at plus 2.
Yep, and I've heard them as a potential landing spot for Atlanta for weeks now. It doesn't surprise me that that's something that they would consider. Atlanta ran the ball at the second highest frequency in the league last season. They don't really have a lead running back per se, right? They've got, Tyler Algier was impressive as a rookie last year, but they don't have much invested in him. And I think that they could look at Robinson and say that this is the guy that we want leading our backfield. So plus 200 is a little thin for me as the number 8 pick, but I did see, I believe that over under is still up, or was that one down too?
It's down, but if you look around, 12.5 is the number I'm seeing. On
I feel pretty comfortable saying that he's going to end up being a top 10 pick.
Okay. And the under's at minus 160. And just for folks that might be new to betting the draft, under meaning you'd have to be 12, 11, 10, 9.
Correct. Yes.
It gets a little confusing. I mean,
you follow me? I get it.
Yeah. And then you got to be careful, which team will, what will the team select with their first pick? And then what team will so-and-so, or what position will each team pick? There's a ton you can look into here for the draft. Which leads me to my next question. What markets do you also like to explore? So you clearly like the over-under market. That interests you. Any other markets that you're eyeing before Thursday?
I think that they can all be profitable if you're following the news. And again, this is something that is extremely fluid. Just look at last year, right? Derek Stingley, you could have gotten at 20-1 to be the number 3 pick not that long before the draft actually started. But by the time that things rolled around, it seemed like that was going to be the direction that the Texans went in, and they ultimately did it. So if you are in a state with legal draft betting, just stay glued to these updates, and there will be opportunities, be it number of quarterbacks drafted, number of, receivers drafted, colleges, right? You can, if you start piecing through the mocks, you can get a pretty good idea of the number of players that are going to come out from each school. There are plenty of opportunities in this market. So, and it's not like the Super Bowl, right? It's not that hard to try and cover them all, to go through them all at least. So, there are a lot of people that make a lot of money just by following the news and being willing to speculate a little bit. So, stay glued. And I would say that when it comes to draft betting more than anything else, buy on rumor, right? If you start hearing whispers that somebody is going to go into a certain spot, make sure you grab them while you still can. Don't wait until it becomes reported, because at that point, all the betting value is gone.
Yeah. I don't mean to, well, I do mean to toot this show's horn, but yesterday when Jeff and I were on, we reacted to the Aaron Rodgers news. The fact that they leaped, the Packers went from 15 to 13 with that pick swap, and you put 2 and 2 together. The Patriots the favorite for the Patriots in terms of first position drafted was wide receiver. Jackson Smith and Jigba, the favored receiver, minus 400, minus 3 something, wherever you look around. And he is the clear-cut favorite to be the first receiver off the board. And now you go to team to draft player. Yesterday, he was at plus 500 on DraftKings. And Jackson Smith and Jigba is now plus 200 to Green Bay. Now, that's not a... I've read plenty of rumors from Packers reporters, The Beat, their blogs, like they're connecting the two because the Packers could surround Jordan Love with another weapon. It also correlates with his over-under draft position at 12.5, with the under significantly or the over, pardon me, significantly juiced.
Right. And in my opinion, the way to bet these is now that you have JSN at, plus 500, if those odds start to swing even further towards the Packers, now you can swing back in and grab the Patriots, then they will probably be plus 500, plus 600 in that vicinity. And if he goes into either of those two spots, you're going to win. So
good point.
That to me is how you bet the draft. Right now it seems like Levis is the riser, so I wouldn't be targeting him. Hopefully you already have your Levis tickets, and now if you wanted to supplement, you can start looking to do that with some of the other players. So it's a little bit of a dual-edged sword. You've got to be willing to take your flyers and then adjust to any new information as it comes out.
Like you said, there are plenty of markets where you can be profitable. Where else might you be looking? Like, do you have any other picks that you'd like to give now, or something you're keeping an eye on?
I mean, I'll be honest, because I can't physically bet on them, I am not as plugged into them as other people. So I don't have my eye on anything like super pertinent at the moment.
Okay.
I would encourage people to follow my buddy Anthony Amico at Amixta on Twitter. For my money, that guy is the best draft bettor in the country. So I would follow him. He has a he puts out mocks. He knows what he's doing. If there's somebody that I am willing to put my stamp of approval on as far as being a draft bettor, it is him. So that's where I would really focus my attention.
Okay. Anthony Amico has contributed to us at DraftKings in the past.
Yes, he has.
He's a friend. He's no stranger. Like you said, he's at Amixta, AMICSTA on the old Twitter machine. So, all right, good deal. Yeah, the Green Bay thing's interesting, I think. But again, you may have lost your chance. Lamarca just mapped it out. Like, you probably lost your chance on that. You lost your chance on, not lost your chance, but you lost value in Levis at 2, but you still think it's bettable at plus 185 at that point. Okay.
Yep.
All right. It's amazing how it's changed in 3 weeks. And CJ Stroud was the clear favorite.
It might change again, but
yeah,
it might change again by Thursday. You never know. This stuff moves wildly. So,
I had one more for you. And it's back to, I think it's team related. Let's see if I go to the Philadelphia Eagles, because I think they've been connected to quite a bit. What they end up doing with their 10th pick, first team drafted. Okay, never mind. You've lost your edge here too. The O-line was at like plus 400, 500 a couple days ago. That's minus 140 now. That makes a lot of sense. Just gave the quarterback a new deal, team friendly-ish, but you're getting older with Kelsey and Johnson, and O-lineman makes a ton of sense for the Eagles.
Yeah, I would say somewhere in the trenches, just based on what they lost in free agency. They lost a starting guard. They lost multiple guys on their defensive line. So I think they will be going with a big body of some type. And 10 does seem like, or 11, wherever they're picking, seems like a pretty perfect spot to sort of scoop up an offensive lineman there. I would say that possibly if Jalen Carter slips that fall, maybe that's somebody they would consider.
Possible.
But That seems like it would be a bigger fall than most are expecting.
Jalen Carter is here over 6.5 is now minus 200. That might still be a decent number to bet him at, only because it sounds like he's really going to fall. I don't see a way he goes unless I guess the Lions, and that makes sense because they
I think he goes
6.
towards the back end of the top 10 would be my prognostication. But, again, there's going to be likely 3 quarterbacks taken in the first 4 picks, right? It's hard to be drafted inside the top 6 when 3 of the spots are going to quarterbacks.
Okay, very good. We'll have draft coverage leading up to Thursday, and then day 2 is Friday. Second, they do what? First round Thursday, second and third on Friday, 4, 5, 6, 7 on Saturday.
Correct.
Very good.
That's the real DGen stuff, man. I can't do it anymore. I remember when I was a kid, I would just plant myself for 8 hours on a Sunday and watch these guys that I've never heard of. And I can't do that anymore, man.
Yeah. No, understanding the state of the league now and the depth of the receiver position, I do think Friday has become more fun and interesting because you can find some guys in the second and third that could start for your team or be a depth piece on a contender and wind up being like a Sky Moore. I know Scott, he didn't have a great year, but he was big in the Super Bowl, and he was
Friday because it's
Friday's good.
You're still getting players that you know of, and it's a little bit quicker paced. Plus, there are normally some Friday props that get posted after Thursday ends that you can look at as well.
Yeah. And folks, reminder, you can bet the draft live. So if you think
we did that a couple of years ago. I don't know if you remember that.
I think we were together. That was the year that was the 21 draft. The year
that was when I nailed that draft, boy. I had the Jamar Chase thing. I had Jalen Waddle going where he went.
Yeah.
And if memory serves, we had my buddy Anthony Miko come on for a little bit. So
you might be right. That makes sense. That was 2 years ago. Wow. The other one, too, I know I'm going to sound like a honk here talking Patriots, but I'm pretty sure you could have grabbed the Patriots at plus money to take a quarterback, and they took Mac Jones.
Yes. I don't know if you remember, I had his over-under. I took it early in the process and got it at like 15.5. And by the time it closed, that number was in the single digits easily. And so I felt like this was a guaranteed slam dunk win. And the Patriots bailed me out on the last possible pick. So
because of all the connections Jones had to San Fran. Yeah, under 15.5, possibly going 3. Turns out he didn't go there, right? He fell quite a bit.
And as our producer T-Pain points out, we will be having another draft show this year. So keep it pegged. I haven't been asked to be a part of it. I would be. Potentially, producers out there, but I know Jeff's going to be doing it. So there'll be a lot of guys out there that are willing to sort of guide you along the way.
All right. We got a couple more minutes. Let's talk about the NBA playoffs and the news of the NBA postseason as it pertains to the next game. Oh, so Golden State doesn't play till tomorrow. I thought that was tonight. Okay.
Weird slate. 3 games, all potential elimination games, all double-digit spreads.
And if you followed carefully, outside of Clippers, Suns, game number 3 in LA, the spread is basically dead in the NBA, at least lately. Point being, if you just lay the points with the favorite has covered in like 59 of the last 60 games.
It's a lot. I would argue absurd, though, that tonight it wouldn't shock me if the spread came into play in at least one, if not a couple of these games. These are big boy spreads
because the books know too. And of course the other side of that token, folks, is if you like the underdog, just take the money line. But to your point, and I agree, these are NFL spreads right now.
Yeah.
13, 10, 12. This is the playoffs. Like, I hate to go all playoffs on you, but double-digit spreads in the NBA playoffs. What do you think? I mean, there's some key injuries too, right? Like
Injuries and suspensions, right? Because DeJounte Murray is not going to play tonight for the Hawks. Of course, we still have no Kawhi Leonard or Paul George for the Clippers. The Timberwolves will be at full strength. They just really, outside of a couple of quarters in this series, have been pretty thoroughly outplayed by the Nuggets. So the Sharps seem to like the Celtics and the Suns to get the job done. They are backing them despite the big spreads. I feel pretty good about Phoenix. I don't think we've seen even remotely close to the best from Phoenix this season or during the postseason. But the Clippers, is Russell Westbrook going to have another 35-plus point game? I can't really see that happening. I think being back in Phoenix, they should just lay the hammer down and wrap things up there. The other two games, it would not shock me if those are a little bit more competitive.
You have a pick? You have a favorite one that you want to give out?
I would say Timberwolves plus 10. I think Minnesota, they're clearly, they have some issues, right? But when they have Karl Anthony Towns and Anthony Edwards both playing at their best, they're good enough to hang in this series. And Denver has been nails at home all year. It's part of the reason why I have a ticket on the Nuggets to win the Western Conference, just because anybody that knocks them out of the playoffs is going to have to come into Denver and win at least one game. But I think the 10 is a lot. Denver hasn't looked unbeatable, and Minnesota at times has played well in this series. So I'll grab the 10 points with Minnesota.
All righty. And then, I mean, there is a lineup. Golden State, Sacramento. Any sniff for the Kings as a home dog with no De'Aaron Fox, potentially?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see what's changed really about this series, right? Like, the Warriors still stink on the road. And De'Aaron Fox certainly didn't seem to be bothered by that finger injury when they were playing in Golden State, right? I think he's going to still be pretty darn effective. So I have no problem grabbing the Kings as small home dogs. And honestly, if you wanted to grab them to win the series, I think that would have some value too. They don't necessarily need to win a game in Golden State to win this series, right? So I still think if you wanted to grab them, it's probably okay, mathematically speaking. Right. If it goes 7, the Kings could definitely be at a bit of a disadvantage just from an experience perspective. But I think that one of the coolest things during this postseason has been the reminder of how good that Sacramento fan base is, man. They are awesome. And, I remember that when they had Chris Webber and Peja Stojakovic back in the mid 2000s, nobody wanted to go in there and play. They had the cowbells and it was a freaking madhouse. And you can't have the cowbells anymore, but those fans are still clearly very passionate about this team. And I think that they have a very good home court advantage.
All right. And how about the Miami Heat up 3-1? They are 11-point underdogs.
What a game from Jimmy Butler.
Yeah.
Can they do it again? I think, honestly, I still think the Bucks are going to win this series.
Giannis is banged up. It was evident in that game yesterday with the back.
It was evident, but they were still leading by double digits with like 5 minutes left in this game. And then Jimmy Butler just caught absolute fire. It was really a Michael Jordan-esque performance, the way he just erupted down the stretch. And Jimmy Butler deserves all the credit for that. The guy is proven to be quite possibly the best big game performer in the league. Nobody elevates their game more in the playoffs than Jimmy Butler. But I think that if Miami is going to win this series, they're going to do it in game 6. So if Milwaukee can go into Miami and just win that game, I expect them to take care of business at home. So even though they're down 3-1, I would expect the Bucks to be double-digit favorites in 2 of the remaining 3 games. It's that one game in Miami that they got to figure out a way to win.
All righty, that is tomorrow, 9:30 Eastern. Bucks Heat. I do want to close on this, and It's connecting the dots to what LaMarcus said when you want to bet the NFL draft and what sort of steps you should take. Lance Zierlein, NFL.com, very tapped in, very active on social media. He just put this out there 7 minutes ago. If Carolina took Levis, parentheses, which I believe is nothing more than a Reddit hoax, the Texans would probably just scream out the pick as loudly as they could without even taking a card up.
Yeah. And that's essentially what I said too, right? They'd run to the podium. They would be ecstatic if they could get Bryce Young.
Okay. So with that, speaks to LaMarcus' point. Maybe there's still a smidge of value taking Levis at 2 to the Texans. And then the other thing he pointed out was he still feels very strongly about Tyree Wilson possibly going 2, not Levis. So his point was more about Young not going number 1.
Gotcha. If Young doesn't go number 1.
If Bryce Young does not go 1 and Levis does, yes. But and in this next tweet, very high on, he has Tyree Wilson in his most recent mock draft, which was beginning of last week. He advocates for Tyree Wilson going 2. And he's going to have one more mock out Thursday morning. And there's a ton of mocks out everywhere. Zierlein's directly with the league, and he responds to people's tweets. He's everywhere. So
he's good. He's definitely good.
Yeah.
So I'll be curious to see what he has on Thursday.
Yep. He said it's coming out Thursday morning. So, all righty. That's it. We need to go. By the way, our draft show Thursday night, H&M draft show will be coming your way with a bunch of coming out Thursday night. So I'm assuming they're going to start right when the draft starts. So at 8:00. So there you go. You have that to look forward to. I'm sure we'll have more as we lead up to Thursday evening for the first round. We need to go. For Matt LaMarca, Brendan Glasheen, thanks for tuning in, everybody. We will see you again tomorrow. Your day starts with the sweat at 11 a.m. Eastern time. Take care.